hanging in a tangled web just at the top of his range of vision. Beside him, Simon was letting his hair do what it wanted. He had greased it down with something. It needed cutting, but Joan had been too busy with her aunt to see about that, and now it ruffled up in thick strings and stood out wildly in every direction. When James turned to look at him, he nearly smiled. With his face sideways to the wind, the roaring sound was quieter. So he kept looking in Simon's direction until Simon grew uneasy. "What you staring at?" he asked. "Nothing," said James. "Some wind we got." He looked straight ahead again, and the roaring sound came back to hammer at his ears. The ground they were treading was wild and weedy, with rocks sticking up here and there, so white they might have been painted. There was no path to follow. Below them was the whole town of Larksville, the main street hidden by trees, but the outlying houses and the tobacco fields laid bare to the sun. At the foot of the hill was the white gravel road where Simon and James both lived. They lived in a three-family house that looked like only a long tin roof from here. No houses stood near it. James's brother Ansel said whoever built their house must have been counting on Larksville's becoming a city someday, but Larksville was getting smaller every year. When anyone went away to college, it was taken for granted they'd never be back again, not for any longer than it took to eat a Christmas dinner in the house they started out in. Yet the long, crowded house sat there, half a mile from town as a bird flies and a mile by car, and its three chimneys were jumbled tightly together, with the smoke intermingling in wintertime. The sight of that green part of town was cool and inviting. It made James think of cold beers in the tavern opposite the post office. He looked down at Simon, but Simon was hunched into the jacket of his suit, and he still seemed cold. "Do you like sardines?" James asked him. "Not much." "Or cold cuts?" "No." They stepped through a tangle of briars with the thorns making little ripping sounds against their clothes. "I could eat a pizza," Simon said. "You better talk to Ansel then. He makes pizzas." Simon tripped and caught himself. He looked down at the small rock that had tripped him and then began kicking it ahead of him down the hill, swerving out of his course to recover it every time the rock rolled sideways. Gray streaks began to show on his shoes, but James didn't try to stop him. When they reached the gravel road, they turned right and began heading in the direction of the house. Simon's rock rolled into a ditch. He left it lying there. It looked as if they might get all the way home this way. Not talking much and not saying anything when they did talk, just as if this were an ordinary walk on an ordinary day. That suited James. He had been thinking too much these last 2 days, turning things over and over, figuring out how if just some single incident had happened or hadn't happened, things might have been different. Now he ached all over, and thinking made him sick. He was just beginning to feel easier, ambling along in silence beside Simon, when Simon turned and began walking backwards ahead of James, fixing his frowning brown eyes on a point far down in the road. He opened his mouth and closed it, and then he opened it again and said, "James." "What?" "How far down in the ground before it starts getting cold?" "Pretty soon," said James. "How soon?" "Pretty soon." "I'm just thinking," Simon said. To keep him from thinking any more, James said, "Then it gets hot again, down towards the center of the earth. That's beyond digging distance." 6 feet under is stone cold," said Simon. "Well, yes." "Good old Janie Rose, boy." "Now, wait," James said. "Now, Janie Rose don't feel if it's cold or it's not, Simon. Get that all straight in your mind." "I know that." "Get it straight now before you go bothering your mother about it." "I know all about that," Simon said. He spun around and began walking forward again, still ahead of James. Strands of his hair rose up and floated behind him like the tail plumes of some strange bird. "You don't get what I mean," he called back. "Maybe not."